Hello everyone and welcome to the sixth conversation about co-production. We're very pleased to welcome another guest with us this week. Unfortunately, Rob is unable. He has some administrative duties he was making excuses about. So really quickly, I'm Joe Langley. I'm a design researcher at Sheffield University in Lab for Living, and just going around. I'll come to you last, Roz, if that's okay. And if you can just do a quick introduction to yourself, and then I'll kind of jump straight in with a couple of questions. So Liz, do you want to go next?
Liz Fletcher, currently on holiday in Exmouth, feeling good, going to Newquay afterwards, but keen to talk to Roz about co-production.
Ace. And Dan?
Yeah, I'm in the same room as I've been in every time, so I'm Dan Wolstenholme, sweltering in Sheffield.
I'm just going to pull the window to, despite how hot it is, because that helicopter noise is going to be, that doesn't make much difference, does it, at all? Okay, Roz, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Hello, also sweltering in Sheffield, actually. So I'm Roz Davies. I'm currently the Managing Director of mHabitat, which is a co-design digital inclusion and innovation team hosted by Leeds and York Partnership Foundation Trust. And I'm really pleased to come along here. I think I've met all three of you at some point in my career, actually, over the last sort of 10 years or so. But I'm afraid particularly pleased to see Liz, who I think is just a fantastic person. So hi, Liz.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, not the other two.
I know you better. I know you better. So I met Liz when doing one of my favourite jobs ever as a Managing Director of Sheffield Powershare, which is a mental health charity in Sheffield. And she was one of the most amazing kind of clinicians that came on board and actually, I think, really made a difference in terms of the co-production work that we did there.
Well, I just need to pass back the compliment, you know, because one of the reasons I was so keen to maintain this session today is because I knew you were on it, Roz, and Roz was probably one of the first people that showed me how to do co-production well, and that kind of first introduction to kind of creating a charity. I mean, I know it wasn't just you, Roz, that was creating that charity, as a whole bunch of you, but the way you went about it was really inspiring, and I think that was I'm sure that was my first experience of what co-production should be and how it should look. So I couldn't miss you today.
Mutual backpacking, Latin.
Fantastic. Roz, do you want to just start off by telling us and everyone else that's going to watch this what co-production really means to you?
It's really interesting, isn't it? It's a very tricky word to begin with, and I'll explain why I think that in a minute. But I guess I would start off with it being more of a verb than a noun. So it's a doing thing, it's a process, it's an interaction. And I think fundamentally it's about relationships, and it's about interacting and sharing. And I think that means sharing power, which is the most important part to me. Sharing understanding, responsibility, trust, and achieving things together, you know, maybe changing something together. And I think the power thing is really interesting because it's about power with, not over, or to, or done to, or yeah. And I think that other thing about power is that, there's my children coming in there. So I think it's about, in its purest form, about equally sharing power, which I think is an impossible quest. And that's where it gets tricky. And I think, so both in terms of when two people are in a room, their power difference, but also, you know, the background behind this, the constructs of society, of systems, of organisations, of services, economics, politics, sorry. And that's all of those things are a backdrop for our relationships and that power sort of exchange between us. So yeah, and that's what co-production means to me, and I think it's very tricky. I think nonetheless it is something to aspire towards, and maybe I'll talk a bit about why I think that in a little while.
So if so that power sharing and equity is an ideal. It's a sort of unobtainable value in a sense. I guess in mathematics we'd call it like an asymptotic value. Why do it? What's the point of?
Joe, can I just point out you're exercising power there through language?
Sorry. Yeah. Why try to do it?
So I absolutely fundamentally believe in sharing power. I think we're more powerful together than we are, by hogging power alone. I think that's one of the key sort of root issues, the problems that we have in society today. And I think in sharing power, what we're actually starting to do is recognise the value of all the experience and expertise and insights and talents and so on in the room. And once we do that, once we're able to do that, once people feel valued, incredible, amazing things happen, as we discovered at Sheffield Flourish. So I think that's the right thing to do. It's the best thing to do, and it's making the most of all that we have, all the resources and people that we have available to achieve good things together.
So in sharing power, are we talking about certain people divesting power or using mechanisms to power up other people? Or how do you kind of see it? Is it, yeah? It's
not a zero-sum game, no. I don't think that at all. And I personally felt it in Flourish and other places that, when you're employed as the managing director, you do have power, whether or not you like it or want to own it, you do have that power. And you have the power and privilege to open doors, to create the conditions where other people feel in the situation and so on. And I think actually, if we're able to join forces, and it's not as easy as I'm making it sound, and it's not as easy as the words we're speaking, is it? Because people are complicated and the life around us is complicated. But if we can achieve that, if we can actually sort of mutually feel powerful in a context and in a situation, mutually feel like we can contribute everything we have to a problem, for example, then surely we're going to get more out of that. And surely we're going to feel more powerful together. So, and I think this hoarding of power that goes on in our society is sort of immature and ill thought through and not sustainable.
I guess go on, Liz, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, I also think that power is something that we don't talk about openly enough, sort of within health services. And I think there's quite a lot of us with power without even realizing it. And I think, certain managers, although managers might be in a position of power on the hierarchy, they often don't. I think that people often don't realize that they're carrying power and therefore don't know how to use it or how to share it. And I'm just trying to think back whether I've ever had any kind of training or anything that talks about kind of power, and that for me is really missing, and that's part of the reason why I want to be involved in these type of conversations, because it's maybe here where we have these conversations. And in co-production sessions I've heard power mentioned quite a bit. So yeah, I think it's just an interesting idea that there's some kind of natural assumption sometimes that people don't share their power because they don't want to. But actually, I think sometimes people don't share their power because they don't know how to, or they don't know they've even got it, even if they're in a position of power.
I think that happens in services and outside in society as well. There's an amazing quote that you probably already know. It's a really well-known one. Alice Walker's quote that says, the most common way people give up their power is by thinking that they don't have any. And I just love that quote. And there's something about, I think there's something about not having the confidence or owning it, or even thinking about it, and not even sort of being a thing. And then also about how you kind of connect with other people and be more powerful together. So some of the big changes that happen, we're seeing it in Black Lives Matter, aren't we? That individuals are coming together over something, a shared purpose, and powerful things are happening. Collective power is an incredible thing. What I would say is that I had the privilege at the end of last year spending a few months with the Sheila McKechnie Foundation, and they're a sort of a campaigning and social change capacity building organisation. And Sheila McKechnie herself was a famous campaigner, and then a group of her, sadly she died at a sort of relatively young age, and a group of people set this organisation up in her name, and they've become sort of really well known in understanding how social change and campaigning works. So they've done an amazing project and piece of research around social change and social power and how it works and all the different ways that we can sort of achieve change, which I find really interesting. So they're worth having a look through if you want to think about power. And I think at the moment they're running a really interesting project called the Shared Power Project, where they're bringing people with lived experience together to understand how to share power. So that probably.
Have you come across as a research social scientist from America who's developed a game called Power Play or Powershare? I tweeted it just a couple of days ago, and it's quite fascinating. It teaches, as an exercise, it makes people more aware of the power that they do have, and also aware of mechanisms they can use to consciously share power with other people. And I think at we've used it a couple of times at the start of co-design or co-production sessions, and I think it's really just bringing it to people's consciousness. I think as a starting point then makes people more aware, because going back to Liz's point, I think there's many people who aren't aware that they have power, especially in the health service and research, because they aren't bad people. They're doing good things, they're helping people, and that kind of, in a sense, disguises the fact that they actually have some, and for some of those people, quite significant power over others. But there's a kind of blindness to it that not consciously, but I think masks some of the kind of challenges. So raising that consciousness and self-awareness is part of the challenge. You've had a very illustrious career, haven't you, Roz? I mean, you've won awards and all sorts of things in the work that you've been doing, but you must have come across sort of certain experiences that you would hold up as exemplars of both how it was done best and how not to do it. Is there any kind of, can you share it without naming any names or dumping anyone in it? Is there any kind of examples of that you either preferably both ends of that spectrum you can share with us?
I think so the credit that Liz gave me around Sheffield Flourish didn't belong to me. Actually, it belonged to the community of people, but particularly there was sort of 2 or 3 or 4 probably founders of Sheffield Flourish, who had lived experience, had experience of delivering services at a strategic level, and both sometimes, that was a really good experience, I think, of as close as you can get to co-production. And one of the reasons it is because I think because those people had a really, really good long-term relationship. They've been through things together. Secondly, that they started it off together. It was a shared thing from the beginning. It wasn't imposed, one person inviting the other person into their room or the other group into their space to do their thing, to achieve the thing that they wanted to achieve anyway. It wasn't any of that. Actually, that they spotted something together and talked about it over a long period of time and found an opportunity to work together to achieve that. And they brought me in along the way. Really, I joined them, and it was a privilege to do that. And I think what they were looking for when they sort of recruited me was somebody who shared those values. So, and I think fundamentally this is about shared values, and someone who I really. When they recruited me, they sort of talked about mental health, and I said, look, I'm not an expert in mental health. I will never be an expert in mental health. I'll always have to work in partnership with people to understand that, because it isn't a thing, I'm not that expert. I don't have learned or lived experience in that area. And my role was something else, to organise the organisation, to bring in the digital experience and so on, create as much as I could to create a flat platform where we could have really good, positive and respectful conversations to achieve good things together. So that was a good experience. I think, what bad experiences. I've had a few, and also I don't think that I've always done the right thing as well, and it's been and it still is a learning process for me. You know, and I guess you sort of learn more about society and those behind the scenes constructs and how you are and who you are and what your impact is on other people, and you learn to do things with that, don't you, as you get older. But I guess years ago, I was responsible for, you won't remember this, I don't think, you guys, but for a £30 million neighbourhood renewal programme across the London Borough of Newham. And what we wanted to do, we had the right intention. We wanted to work in partnership with communities to identify the priorities and then do the right thing in those communities. And we did a few things wrong. The first thing we did wrong was we started with deficit. We started with what the needs were and what the issues were. And we identified them and we're like, oh, all of our wards, they're all deprived and this is what's wrong with them all. Here's a picture of the deficits in your area. And then a good thing that we did was we set up a team of neighbourhood facilitators who were seconded in from different organisations that represented different communities. So I think that was probably a good thing. So we tried to share power and understanding and, you know, work together in that way. But then what we did is we sort of parachuted into these communities with this money and this picture of deficit, and we asked them what their priorities were. And I think that was utterly the wrong thing to do. And since then I've sort of been lucky enough to sort of get to know and work a little bit with Cormac Russell, who is an advocate for asset-based community development. And I think that's kind of all of this in its purest form, probably, as far as you can get there. And learned about how, you know, the role of the system isn't about parachuting in and doing two and rescuing and all those other things. Actually, it's to sort of stand back and create the conditions and, you know, do what people need help, maybe make connections and so on. And I wish we'd done that. So that, yeah, I guess that's my personal experiences of doing things wrong and getting it a little bit better.
That's so valuable. It goes back to something Liz said right in the very first conversation about almost a fear that you have when for people starting out doing co-production of getting it wrong. Even if you have the best intention, actually there is that kind of fear. And I think one of the things, picking up on your, you know, the learning and the I guess what some people call failure or not getting it right, is it's okay to do that, but what's the best way of kind of managing that, and how do you kind of manage that in the process when things do go wrong? What's your approach to managing that, and how can other people who might be wanting to do this, how can they kind of take some strength from that and you know, try it out?
So I think the most important thing to do is to be humble and to recognise that you don't know everything, you never will, and that there are lots of people. I mean, I've just been so privileged in the people that I've worked with, people like Professor Brendan Stone and David Gilbert, who's a patient leader, and various others. And but you know, there's always people who know more about stuff than you do. So first of all, it's being humble and looking for for people who have the other stuff, and recognizing that. And secondly, there's something about the active listening thing. So actually listening, I think the phrase is listening with intent to understand, not intent to reply. So and taking the time to build relationships. And where it's gone wrong, I think again it's about being humble and recognizing that, and being open to sort of feedback and reflections and development. And you know, it doesn't always have a happy ending either, you know, that's life. But you know, also it's okay not to be perfect and not to get everything right, and to be human too. And I think that sort of kindness and compassion for yourself and for others is really, really important, and something I'm glad to see the NHS holding the line on right now. Even though it might not always be perfect, I think as a collective, it's really important that we do stand up for that right now.
I'm just reflecting back on the conversation we had with Brett last week, and he talked about kind of vulnerability and that kind of empathetic relationship with people, allowing that trust to kind of develop, which I guess is that not being humble, being humble, being listening and really kind of valuing what you're hearing. And one of the things that Joe and I sometimes talk about is, especially in kind of research world, is that quite often that listening is a kind of transactional thing. You're listening because you want to take that away and then analyze it and then tell people what they thought they said. And actually, that is why I was really delighted to hear your kind of co-production is a doing word. It shouldn't be a means to an end to gather data. It should be a means to liberate everybody's knowledge into creating something new and better for those people in partnership. I was trying to think about what you'd said about the setup of Flourish, and I was just trying to think if there's a kind of, so it was almost co-productive in conception and in its intent. So the kind of, that people knew they were going to work together, they knew that they couldn't help but work together, and they knew that if they didn't work together, then that end goal would be out of reach. And I think that intentionality, that knowing what you're trying to do, but also thinking about how you're doing it is really key in a lot of these instances have been described.
I think it's often the dilemma because a lot, I work for the NHS at the moment, and a lot of the opportunities, the resource, focus and all the rest of it are imposed, aren't they? And then you're sort of you have a thing in mind, and then you go and get some people with lived experience to come and co-produce it with you, and that in itself is not a great start. And it's a big challenge, isn't it, along the way? Because the difference with the Sheffield Flourish thing was that from the start there were a group of people with different experiences that wanted to do something together, as opposed to often including some of the work I'm currently doing. There's a brief, isn't it? There's a brief that there's co-design in it, but there's a brief, and so you haven't started from the very beginning. That doesn't mean to say that it's not worthwhile engaging, listening, bringing people in, trying to create the conditions where really good conversations and stuff happens, but it isn't as gold standard as it could be.
I think just reflecting back on my experience of Sheffield Flourish, and one of the reasons why I think back on it as a good experience isn't because everything was absolutely perfect in it, but it was also because I sort of grew with the charity and actually got to know. Are you there?
Yeah.
Sorry, my battery's going. But it was the values that you talked about earlier on that you kind of instilled in. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
That you instilled in kind of how important that was, and how important it was to build them relationships and connect with each other and share and be open. It was them things that kind of made me feel that the co-production sessions were great, rather than that every single session was perfect. There were times where I thought, as a participant, because I felt much more like a participant, although I think you were trying to share the power, I felt that I had more control in how the charity should develop. And then I realised that I actually only had a shared control in certain aspects of, the charity and how it's developing, not all of it. And so I think my reflection of that it was good. Yeah, it wasn't. It's not that it's perfect, and I think as a participant, I think it's important to understand that what you're all doing together is going to be often have bumps in the road, and but you all kind of figure that out together. And so I think that kind of that values and that initial kind of foundation that you created for me made that all possible.
I think that relates massively to the term you used, the humbleness, and that again, that was something that came up in the very first conversation we had, and it's really, I'm really happy that you've kind of echoed that as well, because I think it's alongside the humility, there's also got to be this kind of really real honesty about what you're doing and the imperfections. It's warts and all. So if the intent is, we've got this shared thing that we want to look at and explore together, and we're going to do it the best way that we can, but we're all human, so it's not going to be perfect. That's inevitable. And I think if these activities are framed in that way, then people are inherently more forgiving. I mean, I've experienced that just in, sort of lockdown scenarios where you're having meetings and children and pets come in. It's people are more forgiving of all of those kind of interruptions, or I've got to leave the meeting to go and answer the door to the postman. Back in the offices and the buildings, to just exit the meeting to go and do something else that was unnecessary would have been, people wouldn't have done it so much. So there's when you are in those kind of shared experiences that are imperfect, people are more forgiving of those things, and I think that allows you to be more upfront about the imperfections that are likely to be there.
Yeah, and able to, and if you're honest about all of those things, the constraints, how you're feeling, all of those things, then actually you're more likely to be able to work through the problems together. I think honesty is really, and frank, gentle honesty all round is a sort of key sort of factor, I guess, a key principle of it in building trust, which is, one of the fundamentals of co-production to me.
What are we, you're just intriguing me and making me think about, I think this is a question for the three of you really, in terms of what you're describing, and therefore what are we asking of our kind of future leaders, and what kind of style are we asking of our leaders that's potentially in contrast to what we've been asking of our leaders in the past. And I think I don't know whether it's my experience, I'm meeting the likes of you, Rob and Dan and Joe, and not Rob, Joe, Dan, Roz and Rob. I'm meeting more and more people that I feel have these qualities to take kind of this idea around co-production forward. But we're still surrounded by traditional leadership, aren't we? And it's everywhere still. And how far have we got to go?
Well, I mean, I guess people have to be leaders within the context they find themselves as well. And so you can model co-productive approaches and try and model honesty and transparency in your engagement with people. But I guess, I guess that's it. But you sometimes are able to clearly articulate the boundaries to which you can accommodate different perspectives and views and wants and needs, and other times you've got very fixed things that I guess around budgets, and this is where Rob's doing. He's singing for his supper this evening. He can't be co-productive about that. He's got to toe the line. What do you think, Joe? I mean, working in larger organisations, he says, thinking about Sheffield University, how does that constrain your style of leadership?
I try not to have a style of leadership. So I think there's an impact from the level of scrutiny that people get in observation. So obviously, I think within Sheffield Hallam, I'm fortunate in that I have very little sort of managerial oversight in one sense that's sort of imposing things upon me too much. They have processes which we have to comply with, but I think it's not like, say, the national leadership that we have, whatever our personal opinions on how good or bad that is, they have a scrutiny from the media which is completely unforgiving, and the scrutiny, the way in which that scrutiny is framed, may in fact almost encourage and nudge people towards a certain style of leadership, and that I think is when you get the large kind of scale of, so the leadership in the NHS England and so on will be subject to the same kinds of external forces which make a style or a selection of a choice of leadership style more constrained and limited, and I think that's a really important factor that I guess we have to be aware of at the level that I'm operating at. I don't have that kind of scrutiny and critical external voices pointing a finger of accusation and blame at me for every little mistake that I make. And
is that because I don't work with you anymore?
But I think it's important. I think when you constantly have people telling you you're doing it wrong, Again, this has come up in our previous conversations, this idea of failure. So in design, that's a positive thing. It's a learning opportunity. And if it's framed like that, we know that children flourish under those circumstances when failures are actually defined as, it's important learning. People have to, in a sense, make mistakes and do things wrong in order to be able to do things right later, and understand why they're doing them right. But when it's framed in this sort of accusatory and more failure kind of mindset, then it changes the whole approach for everyone within the kind of collaboration.
But my challenge, well, not my challenge, but the reason I think that happens nationally, locally, or wherever, is because some are hoarding power. And that's a way of hoarding power, isn't it? So the reason the media's, who's behind the media doing that? Why are they doing it? What are they getting out of it? And so on. And I know it's not some of it's driven by society, and it's there's a cycle there and all the rest of it, but actually there's some purposefulness in all of that I don't like personally. I've got a bit of a thing about leadership as well. I'm not really comfortable with this leader thing, but I think it's not the reason is because I believe that everyone has the potential to offer a direction of travel and an idea, and sort of push towards social change, which I think is leadership. But not everybody has the same opportunities to do that, and that bothers me. So there's that kind of thing in it. And I do agree that the sort of system around you can constrain you, and can present lots of different barriers and difficulties, and culture, for example, is one of those big things, particularly in the NHS, I think. Also, there's something about the people, I think people who care about these things like we do, and there's a lot of other allies and people out there, some fantastic people doing amazing stuff out there. I think we have to be brave in our leadership, in quote marks, and we're sort of bridge builders, aren't we, into what we think might be a better future. Some of this is aspirational, isn't it? This is how we really want it to be. So we're going to do our bit right now. We're going to have our own strategies around how we do that. We're going to do our bit right now. So one of the things I like doing is sticking my foot in the metaphorical door so that I can bring other people in, especially as I get older. So I manage a team of really incredible, mostly young women. And I'm really up for sort of doing what I can to get them a platform to support them to really flourish. And that's my job. There's all sorts of different things and strategies we can do within these constraints, I think. And we do have to be brave, because it isn't easy. And it is, I'm sure, well, I've sweated blood and tears over this sort of thing before now, and been frustrated and got it wrong and been cross with myself, So, yeah, it's not easy.
So I certainly notice when leaders are brave and they I don't want to say sort of fight power or what stand up to power, and in a way that makes them vulnerable, or in a way that they're kind of just bending the rules slightly, so they can kind of advocate sort of a co-productive approach, or be inclusive. Maybe they're not bending the rules, but it can seem that they're stepping away from a certain structure or a certain culture of a way of working. Maybe that's what it is more than anything, actually, culture, thinking about it. And when you step out of that culture, or be brave and show that you're prepared to do something differently. And I so admire that when I see that in other leaders, and we just need more of that, don't we? And I've seen there's a lot of compliments today. I promise you I haven't had a beer before the show, but I've seen it in the show. Sorry, I'm gonna have one after. But yeah, I have seen it in some of the leaders that I've met in Sheffield, and yeah, I hope to see more of that as well.
We've kind of covered a lot of, I guess, what might be personal attributes that people who want to be involved in co-design and co-production have to have. So the honesty, the humility, the active listening, those kinds of things. But I guess in my experiences, it's almost inevitable that at some point you don't start off with all the right people on these processes, having these conversations. So you bringing other people on board further downstream during the process is going to be a necessity at some stage. And I wondered if there were any kind of practical things that you may have done or you find works quite well in terms of bringing new people on who have expertise that isn't within the kind of current group that's necessary. How can you bring them in such a way that they kind of fit into the same kind of sense of power sharing and equity and things like that? Is it just about finding the right person, or
I guess it's different for different contexts. The thing that I'm always interested in doing is at the start, I'm really interested in the diffusion of innovation curve. And so starting with the innovators and the early adopters, and I think you have different strategies for different sort of people. So, you know, finding a group of people who care about the thing that you care about and who are up there at the head of the curve, or, you know, wherever, whatever, but who sort of easy, you know, they have a set of values. And then what you do is you form a core, don't you? You've got like a core sort of strong root, if you like, and then you add to that. So if you've got a core strong root and culture and all that sort of thing, when someone else comes in, I think it's really important to always understand and value what they're bringing, and allow the sort of shape to change, you know, with this new set of assets and things. And dynamics will always change. We're people, aren't we? That's what happens. So that's important. But also, I guess, if you're trying to, you know, if you've got a sort of a group of people that are trying to hold on to that culture, I guess, and values and everything, then you know that sort of makes it stronger. So I guess there's something about, there's a balance, isn't there, between finding people who are like-minded and who care about those things, and finding people who have got different things and other things to add to the picture, and allowing the shape to change with their additions,
whilst maintaining the kind of core cultural qualities that
that brought you all there in the first place. Yeah, but I guess that's a thing that you have to work through together, that isn't ever the same, exactly the same.
So I know we're short on time. I was just going to expand that slightly. So I guess sometimes when you have that kind of key group set together and they've got that established way of working, but then you do need that expertise in a specific, it might be a practical or a technical skill. It's how you kind of bring that in, recognize that expertise, but then enable that. I think it's what you were saying. Then then the strong core is able to bring that in, recognize and share within the expertise that already lies within the group, but also then take that technical stuff and blend it together as well.
Allow the shape to be a bit fluid, so that actually, you know, you get the most out of the new people in the room and the new conversations in the room. It's really, it's like team building, isn't it? It's the same as team building in a way. Yeah. I
guess it's a fundamental recognition first. I mean, Dan and myself have both referred to it as the expertise or the knowledge, but actually it's just a person. As you said, we're all just people. And whilst they might come with a very specific skill set or knowledge or expertise that is necessary to do a specific task, they also bring a whole bunch of other stuff which will be valuable and useful to the whole endeavour of whatever it is.
I think also there's something, isn't there, about I was on a call earlier today, and someone said about being able to see the dark spots, you know, where you're not, where the failings are, where the gaps are, you know, where the issues are, and not just focusing on how great this all is and how successful we all are and everything, but actually, you know, where's the bits that, you know, we're missing, that we're going wrong in, you know, and who are the people who have those expertise and really valuing that, and then there's something about, you know, not being, this is a sort of design thing, isn't it? Not being fixed on the solution, focusing on the goal, really, not on the actual solution, and co-designing that, you know, and achieving that together.
So with that, would I guess, try doing the thing that we always say we shouldn't do, reinterpreting some of what you said. There's a kind of reflective, a really important reflective part to these teams or these activities that has to be kind of linked to that honesty as well. That has to be kind of looking at what we've done, looking at how we've done it, and being quite brutally honest, but in constructive ways, about where we can do things differently and better and improve on various different things. And that's got to be a very continuous, never-ending kind of ongoing thing. I guess is that I guess team-based and individually.
Yes, definitely. There's something about being able to hear feedback and things as well, isn't there? And also creating the conditions where people feel able to. So I've been involved in quite a lot of things, including research with my patient leadership hat on, because I live with type 1 diabetes. And actually, because I've got other experience as well, I felt, confident, and I understand some of the lingo and all the rest of it. So I've felt able to sort of speak up, but I don't think the situation is always conducive to that. Whereas there has been times when I've wanted to give feedback and not been able to because of the way that the things have been set up and the power dynamics and, the culture in the room and so on. So it's accepting, being able to accept and understand feedback as a positive thing because it helps us grow and so on, but also creating the conditions where people feel confident and able and free to contribute their feedback.
I'm very aware that we're pushing your time limit now, Roz. You have to get on to another meeting, don't you? Is that right?
I do, yes. There's a tiny bit of flexibility, but yes, probably, yes.
I've just I was just going to say, I've really enjoyed the kind of focus on the topic of power, and it would be great. I was just thinking, if we do more sessions, I wonder who we could invite to kind of explore that topic of power on an even sort of deeper level. I think that would be really interesting. But I don't know whether you, Roz, have got, not specifically about power, but any other sort of connections in this field that you might recommend for us to contact for further sessions in September. But if you have any, let us know.
Oh, definitely. So there'll be a lot of people who are in the patient leadership field who will be interested in that. And then secondly, there's, as I mentioned earlier, the Sheila McKechnie Foundation, because they're doing that Powershare project. So they might
sounds good.
in speaking to them, so I can connect you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Oh, and of course,
Brendan. Thank you very much. Brendan Stoke.
He's always a brilliant person to talk to about these things.
Yeah, that'd be good. Also, that blind spot you were talking about, there's a book, is it by Margaret Heffernan? Have you read that? Is it called What About Your Blind Spots or something like that? Have you heard of Margaret Heffernan? She's brilliant. Well, anyway, that is a must read around organisation and about blind spots.
Excellent.
I can't really tell you any more than that at the moment.
Let's see if we can let's see if we can look that up and add it to the as a reference to the video when we, and I'll certainly have a read of that. Dan, I'm going to see if I can dump, seeing as you put me in the position of chairing this, I'm going to dump you with the position of summarising.
Yeah, well, no.
Say goodbye to them.
Yeah, I was very quickly trying to think it through. So I think what I'm hearing from this discussion that's coming out is that there's this kind of reflective process. So I think we all kind of have a sense of what we think good co-production looks like. And I think what we're sort of saying is that as individuals, whenever we're in that position to perhaps convene or to be part of that, we role model the sort of behaviours that we want to see in others. And that kind of hopefully creates the culture that of trust that Roz has pointed out has kind of heralded successes in so much that they've happened within her own experience. So I think that those kind of attributes at an individual level are kind of, I guess, where we can exert our influence most effectively. And we just hope that by doing that and by sharing those kind of attributes with others and surrounding ourselves with people with those attributes, that we can kind of hopefully create that sense going forward. It's a bit clunky. Roz, I'm going to just suggest words of wisdom from you, and then we'll...
Something,
Final thoughts?
yeah, I'll just say one liner really, because it's something I thought ages ago in a job that I was in, and every time I sort of get involved in a different sort of thing or group of people, I always come away going, yeah, it's the same again. And it's that when people feel truly valued, really incredible things happen. So it's really about valuing people fundamentally in your team, in partnership, patient, clinicians, whatever. It's about valuing people, and then you can get some really fantastic and surprising things emerge.
Good ending point.
Thanks, Roz.